Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video today. So today we're going to be working on a completely different project. The current project is of course the drag race TME, which is right here. And that is still rolling forward, but occasionally guys, I need to make a bit of money to dump into the drag race TME. And so I have a customer car in here, so it's going to be a Evo 9 Wagon. Very, very, very good looking car. Now the reason the car's in is that the owner wants the engine bay painted, and so for that what we're going to be doing is removing the engine and transmission, transfer case, all that stuff, dropping everything out the bottom, going through a bit of the wiring, making sure everything is clean and tidy, masking everything off, taking care of any rust or any corrosion that there might be in spots where you can't see, like the lower parts of the chassis, the frame rails, the rad support, things like that. And then we're going to be spraying it red just to match the body, just to refresh the engine bay. So let's take a look at what we're working with. Okay, so here we are guys. So this is the engine bay of the Evo 9 Wagon, and you know what, it's just a bit dusty. It's not terrible. Now compared to the outside of the car, which is pretty much spotless, I guess it would be a bit terrible, but realistically not that bad. Now some things that would be concerning is just there's a tiny bit of rust poking through in some places, and now that's on the rad support. So what the concern would be is if there's a tiny bit of rust here, what's going on way down in there. Okay, so that's something that we need to figure out. Now to do that, pretty much everything needs to be removed. That's just how it is. And so I guess for some regards this is for longevity for the car, but also it's cosmetic, right? So if you go to a car show, you pop your hood, you want it to be as clean as the outside most times, right? So that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, so step one guys is going to be a ton of disassembly. So let's jump on that and see how far we get. Okay, so where we're at here, we're about to pull the engine and transmission. The engine and transmission are going to be still mated together. The transfer case, however, is going to be disconnected. Now the whole idea for that is that I don't want to go through pulling the subframe. On these cars, the transfer case is above the subframe, whereas the 456 cars, the transfer case is below the subframe, which makes it a lot easier to pull everything out. Now if you pull the subframe on these cars, what that causes is you have to mess with the steering rack. You then have to probably, after assembling everything, recenter the steering wheel, deal with a bunch of fluids. It's not necessary. Now if you do want to pull the subframe out, then certainly go through all that. But if you're just looking to get the engine and transmission out, we can do it a different way. So let's take a quick look. Okay, so what we have under here is we have a strap, and what I've done is I've unbolted the transfer case and I've just pulled it over to one side. So what this allows is for the transmission to be completely disengaged. So now the idea is that the engine and transmission can go that way towards the front of the car. Now the reason that we can move everything forward, if we come around here, you know, look at all this space. Okay, so condenser out, oil cooler lines out, and radiator out. And so we have a good 6 to 8 inches here that the engine can move forward. And this will allow the engine and transmission to be pushed through the bottom without the subframe, the steering rack, and the transfer case being removed. Okay guys, so engine is out. We're taking a good look at the rust and sort of what steps to take to reseal everything. Now fortunately there are no holes, so there isn't going to be a lot of cutting and welding, but we do need to reseal anywhere where we remove surface rust, whether that be with sandblasting or grinding, and that fresh metal has to be resealed. So we're going to be using a few different products. Most of them are going to be epoxy based products for rust encapsulation, and some of them are going to be applied by brush, some of them are going to be applied with a spray gun. So this is where we're at now. Some of the rust that's been removed is going to have to be sealed from the other side of the panel as well. So now in the case of the upper rad support, it's going to be very easy to access. So we'll do some repairs on the outside, get all this rust cleaned up and resealed, and then we're going to go on the other side of the panel and seal it on the back as well. And that will prevent basically a lot of the moisture or the corrosion from popping through the front. Now getting into the frame rails here, it's a lot of just surface rust. So we're going to reseal the frame rail right across. Now you can take a step further and go and spray an oil in through the openings on the frame rail to protect the back of the panel. But in this case, these frame rails are very thick. They're 3 plies of metal. So it probably isn't necessary to do that unless you're doing something really serious like a restoration. If you are doing a real in-depth restoration, you would have also removed all of this, which we're not going to be doing. So a lot of this can be just pulled out of the way, and a paint gun can very easily get in to these little spots here. Okay, so we're gonna start working on the rust and get everything masked up for some paint. Alright guys, so at this point I've sprayed epoxy as well as a couple coats of primer, so high build primer. And the reason I'm using the high build primer is because I took all the rust out of the metal. Now after like blasting and grinding and stuff like that, there's still plenty of metal left, but it's uneven a little bit because of obviously I'm removing some metal to get all the corroded metal out. Now at that point it'd be a good idea to have something that's going to even it out. Now the metal wasn't soft, it didn't need to be cut out, but it did need all of the oxidization removed. So after I did that, I put on a heavy epoxy to cover the areas that were the most corroded. That epoxy has a rust encapsulator design, so it cuts off the oxygen to the metal. Hopefully, well, in my experience, the product that I use, it doesn't come back, where if you prep it, you get rid of most of the rust, you put on this heavy epoxy based product that cuts off oxygen to the metal, so it's airtight and watertight. The corrosion isn't coming back. Now because it's a very thick product, it's going to cause the area to be a little bit uneven. So that's why I decided to use a spray epoxy over everything, and then a high build primer. And at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly block everything out so that it's a bit straight. So that's going to mask some of the irregularities in the metal underneath that's resealed, and we're going to go from there. So taking a good look at the primed engine bay, some of that rust was along the front, and it's slightly wavy in spots. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go over that with 400 and then 600 and just sort of block it. That should straighten it out, and then at that point I can just spray the red, and it'll I'm sure turn out really well, because I've used all of these products dozens of times before, and they work. So yeah, so I'm going to get to sanding and then spray the red paint, which is color matched to the Evo that I'm working on, and then we're going to start reassembly. So that's where we're at. Okay, so just waiting for the paint to cure a bit, but this is where we're at. So if you recall, I mentioned using a bit of high build primer to smooth out some of those areas that rust was removed. So nice and smooth overall. Strut towers turned out nice. And I propped up the fender just so that I'd be able to get a little bit of paint under the edge here. So once the fender is bolted down, obviously we won't be able to see any lines or anything like that. Just that little bit of wedge in there that raises it up a bit so that we could get a bit of paint under. At this point, we're just waiting for the paint to cure well before assembly. I don't want to rush things and end up bumping the paint where it hasn't cured yet and taking a chunk out of it or something. So I'm going to leave it for about 24 to 30 hours in a nice warm environment so that paint can harden up a bit. And yeah, the whole wiring harness is here wrapped up, so we didn't get any overspray on there. And yeah, we'll be going from there. So next is a bunch of assembly now that all the rust and corrosion is gone. All right, guys, so engine is back in. I left the paint for a couple days to cure. For this job, I'm really not on a timeline. It's still middle of winter here, and customer is not going to be driving this in the winter. So I gave it a couple extra days, probably about 4 or 5 days to really harden up, and that makes it a lot easier on me, as far as I don't have to worry too much about bumping anything and damaging the paint. So it's really coming together nice. I put in the engine, transmission, transfer case, and AC lines, power steering lines. I haven't done any of the wiring. I have it sort of just carefully bundled up and pushed to the side. And yeah, the whole job is coming along really good. So I'm thinking this is probably another maybe 3-4 hours of work, and then I'll be putting fluids into it, and yeah, be all done. Yeah, so you can see, you know, where I painted is all, where I had to cut off is all hidden. When the fender's bolted down, I mean, I cut the paint off like way inside here. Over here in the corner, I cut it off back here, so it's under this plastic. Yeah, so turned out really nice. So yeah, another rust repair, corrosion repair, engine bay refresh, and I think the customer will be really happy. So we'll wrap this up. Okay, so the car is back together. The paint turned out well. If you check out the match, it's pretty darn good. So overall, this went okay. The car is pretty much done. The customer doesn't want me to put the front bumper back on because he has some powder coating that he wants to do with a few of the brackets up here, which is fine. And so it is pretty much wrapped up. This sort of work I do quite often, as far as just engine bay detailing, getting the bay looking good again. Obviously there's more stuff that could be done with this bay. A lot of the plastics could be restored, valve cover could be painted, a whole bunch of stuff. But really it's up to the person who owns the vehicle. So what they wanted me to do was to clean up the engine bay, get rid of some corrosion that was there, and just get it looking good and stop some of the deterioration that was happening with a bunch of surface rust that existed in the bay. So that is done. So everything's resealed, and we're gonna go from there. So thanks for checking out the video today. If you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell so that you know when I'm putting up new videos. And as well, I do also have a Instagram page, which is also at Wrench Rampage. So please go check that out as well. Have a good night.